Hello, everyone, and welcome to Mother of the Nation. I'm Jenny Levine, Program Coordinator for the Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, also known as OLLI at Duke, a proud sponsor of today's program. Thank you to Carter Q and the Durham County Library for supporting this event in this beautiful historic space, the Hayti Heritage Center. And thank you, Telly Shabu, for the beautiful music. Leonida Inge is WUNC's Race and Southern Culture reporter, the first public radio journalist in the South to hold such a position. She explores modern and historical constructs to tell stories of poverty and wealth, health and food culture, education and racial identity in the South. Leonida is also co-host of the podcast Tested and the host and producer of Polly, the podcast, inspired by Polly Murray. She's a graduate of Florida A&M University and Columbia University Graduate School of Journalism. She's been reporting for over 20 years, teaching for many of them, and her award-winning reporting has reached the ears, hearts, and lives of thousands of people in North Carolina and beyond. Leonida Inge has reported about her experience spending the night in a slave cabin in historic Stagville, reported about Confederate monuments, been involved in the Polly Murray Center for History and Social Justice for many years, and won many awards for her brilliant work. Please help me welcome Leonida Inge.
Well, good afternoon. Really, I'm here just to say a brief hello because we have a very special guest here today, and she'll be taking the stage soon. I'm Dr. Wanda Hendricks to tell us about this phenomenal woman that many of us probably don't even know much about, but you will know and be able to tell your friends and family and keep spreading the word about this Madie Hall Xuma. Before we start our conversation today, I hear that there's actually a short PowerPoint presentation just to introduce you to Madie Hall Xuma. And after that, I have a conversation with this great author who's poured so much of her energy and her life and her time into the dynamic Madie Hall Xuma. So thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Well, it gives me great pleasure and honor to introduce our guest today. I have to admit that I had never heard of Madie Hall Xuma, nor had I heard of Dr. Wanda Hendricks. But I did do a little bit of research on her, and I was really thrilled and quite excited to hear what she has to say today, and I'm sure we will all be. I am just going to read a little brief bio of her. Wanda A. Hendricks is Distinguished President Professor Emerita at the University of South Carolina. She served at the this lighting is getting my light. She served as the National Director of the Association of Black Women Historians from 2003 to 2005, was a senior editor of the 3-volume Black Women in America, second edition published by Oxford University Press in 2005, and is currently an editor for the book series Women, Gender, and Sexuality in American History at the University of Illinois Press. She has published a number of articles and essays, including a recent essay on Black women and politics in the National Women History. I am so sorry. Museum. Let me read that again, please. She has published a number of articles and essays, including a recent essay on Black women and politics in the National Women's History Museum's anthology, Determined to Rise. Women's Historical Activism for Equal Rights, published in August of 2002. Her books include Gender, Race, and Politics in the Midwest, Black Club Women in Illinois, and the first biography of Black activism and intellectual Fannie Berry Williams. Fannie Berry Williams, Crossing the Borders of Region and Race. That was awarded the Letitia Woods Brown Prize. The Life of Madie Hall Xuma, Black women, global activism during the Jim Crow and apartheid, the first biography of Xuma Hall. Ladies, I welcome you, and gentlemen, our next speaker, Ms. Dr. Wanda Hendricks.
Thank you all for coming. I'm in some ways at a little loss for words. I feel like Madie brought us all together. She believed in coalitions, and she brought us together through Carter Q. Most people have no idea. I never met Carter Q until today. We've talked on the phone so much over the last few months that I felt like I knew him well in another life. And I feel like Madie has worked through him to bring all of the organizations that Madie belonged to together for this special occasion. So thank you very much for welcoming me and being present here to learn about a woman who I'm sure most of you have never heard of and were not aware of. And so I want you to get to know her a little today. And just to do a very, sort of brief PowerPoint, Leonita told me they can get real long, and they can, and I can start yakking and talking about the pictures, but I want you to see her through pictures so that you have some sense of who she is and what I had to work with. She left me a lot, actually. I had to dig hard to find it, but she did leave me a lot. So before I start, though, I really want to thank the Durham County Library and especially Carter Q for making this happen. The only, when he called, he left me a message on my, he's probably gonna kill me. He left a message on my answering machine at home or on my phone, and I'm listening to it, and he kept pronouncing Madie Hall Xuma's last name correctly when he said it. I'm not pronouncing it correctly, and nobody who's gotten up here has actually pronounced it correctly, but he does. That's the only reason I called him back. I returned his call. So it is a pleasure to have met him today for the first time, and that he was able to pull this off and to have all of these organizations, the AKAs, the National Council of Negro Women, the African American, the AME Zion Church, the YWCA, all of these organizations, the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs, coming together. These were all organizations that she belonged to, she believed in, and to have them coming together today in 2023. So thank you very, very much for welcoming me. And I've got tissue because I've actually hearing Margaret Mitchell in particular to tell me that she was a fan and that she got on a plane to come down here just for me and for me because I'm talking about Madie Hall Xuma. I cannot express what that means. As an academic, we work in isolation. And so I've been gathering stuff on her, actually writing about her, and intensely for the last 7 or 8 years. And so it means a lot to me that you all showed up, and in particular, Margaret Mitchell and the YWCA. I've made some fast friends in the YWCA in talking about Madie and learning about her life. So again, thank you very, very much. And like I said, let me get to this PowerPoint before this gets to be too long. You can see Madie in this world. It is okay, something went wrong there. I knew I was going to screw this up. Okay, there we go. The audio here, I'm hoping that it's going to play. Well, it doesn't. I wanted you to hear her talking to Lyda Moore Merrick. As I was standing outside in the Lyda Moore Merrick gallery, I also sort of teared up because Lyda Moore Merrick and Madie Hall Xuma were friends. Yep, okay, where's that one? Okay, so I didn't do that. Yeah, Lyda Moore-Merrick and Madie Hall Xuma were very, very good friends, and I wanted you to hear them, this oral interview. To those of you who don't know who Lyda Moore-Merrick is, just a little about her as well. But you'll get a glimpse of a social, political, economic, and cultural activist who was certainly one of the most prominent Black citizens of the state of North Carolina and of the city of Winston-Salem, as well as one of the most prominent alums of Winston-Salem State University and Shaw University in North Carolina and Columbia University Teachers College in New York. Perhaps even more important, she was one of the most significant and distinguished Black American global figures of the latter half of the 20th century. I began Hall Xuma's story with the reflections from a white American named Edith Babcock Coconut, who lived in South Africa for several years with her husband, Robert Coconut. With permission from her daughters, Peggy Kaplan and Diana Coconut, I can tell you that Edith Coconut was as intrigued by Hall Xuma when she first met her as I have been. Coconut discovered, and I put that in quotes, Hall Xuma by happenstance. She wrote, "It was Mrs. Xuma who first caught my eye in 1954. She looked so familiar, yet so strange in this multiracial group. I saw her as we were leaving a defiance campaign meeting in Johannesburg, South Africa. I was sure I detected an American Southern accent and wondered what an American Negro would be doing in this land of apartheid. I too discovered Hall Xuma by chance, like Edith Coconut, and I wondered who this Black woman was when I first met her more than 40 years ago while visiting with my great aunts who lived next door to her in Winston-Salem. She never had a last name and was simply Miss Madie to me, but she seemed to know a great deal about Africa. I was so intrigued, I spent years researching her life. The following is some of what I found. And so I wanted to start with you seeing her at Slater Institute, or now Winston-Salem State University. You had been able to read some of this. This comes out of the Winston-Salem Journal. And so you see some of her classmates. This is the commencement. They get a Bible at the end, and she takes it to Shaw. You also see her as a cultural iconic figure. They put this presentation on. It first appeared in Greensboro. Over 1,000 people showed up at that one, as they say, and they then did it again in Winston-Salem. So she becomes a cultural figure in Winston-Salem. She played an instrument, she sang, she did all kinds of things, and put on a number of shows. The next picture is to connect her to the African Methodist Episcopal Zion Church. And if anyone, those who are historians of the church, you know Bishop Linwood Cowles lived in Winston-Salem, and Madie Hall Xuma was very good friends with his third wife. In this case, this is her second wife who has died. And Madie is playing what is underlined, she is playing the organ for the funeral. So she's very engaged with the AME Zion Church, as has been noted here, and very much engaged with the community. Here you see the YWCA connection. She becomes the executive secretary of the Winston-Salem branch. And she wants to make sure that the young girls will keep the fare low so that as many young women will be able to, young girls will be able to go to be able to go to this camp. I wanted you to see her as a part of the YWCA and how connected the YWCAs were in North Carolina. You also get to see here, I did skip a picture, but we'll go ahead and go here with the AKAs, how connected she was to the AKAs. She becomes an AKA in 1948. There's a slight discrepancy. She says she was actually inducted in the late 30s, but I couldn't prove that. But I do have her certificate in 1948 when it is signed by the AKAs when she comes home from South Africa for the first time after the war. And so we have the AKAs here. They are very much engaged in civil rights in the 1940s, and Madie is going to appear on one of the radio stations in Winston-Salem to be talking about that. So the AKAs have a long history of civil rights education and being engaged during the Civil Rights Week here in this photograph. Okay. All right, I think I'm going too bad. I wanted to, there is a picture here that gets her to South Africa so that you can see Cape Town. She marries Alfred B. Xuma in 1940 and gets on a ship. And if anybody's thinking about this, and a historian, you know that the World War II was actually going to start. Already it started in Europe, so it was already a war. And so in 41, the United States will get involved in it's called World War II. And so she is actually sailing on a ship in 1940. There was all kinds of issues, but initially she was supposed to go before that. The federal government would not let her go, and so she finally gets on the ship in 1940 and sails out of New York Harbor and goes over to South Africa to marry Alfred Bettini Xuma. So anyway, I had a picture there so that you can see Cape Town when it doesn't look like there was a modern day picture, so that you could sort of see what she might have seen when she arrived. She starts the Zenzele clubs in 1941, and it's the Zenzele clubs that she links to the YWCA, the worldwide, well, to the national Y in South Africa, and also to the worldwide. Keep in mind, by now, apartheid is going to become a major part of her life, and so she then starts flying between the United States and South Africa, and so she's going in and out of Jim Crow. And so she leaves Jim Crow and goes to apartheid, and then she leaves apartheid and she comes back to the United States. And I call it a schizophrenic world that she's living in, which is fascinating in and of itself. These pictures come from the Worldwide in Geneva, Switzerland. And as you can see here, she's members of the Zenzele Y training workshop. This was the crux of the YWCA. They wanted to make sure that young women and girls were trained to be leaders for the next generation. And here you finally see her and her husband, Alfred B. Xuma, grappling with what apartheid had done to them, forcing them out of their home. You know, in the United States, we could sort of say urban renewal was kind of that, but apartheid was different. They actually sent the police in to remove people from their homes, took their land, and they were caught up in that. And so they launched a worldwide fight with the South African government, and Madie Hall Xuma will offer her what I found was one of the most critical analyses of apartheid. And she would tell the National Association of Colored Women's Clubs that when she came home, they came to her defense and to her and her husband's defense. This is her at the World YWCA meeting when she becomes a member of the Executive Council of the World Y. So we have an American who is representing South Africa and a Black American who is representing South Africa on the World Y Executive Committee. It's really amazing that we don't know any of this. And what's really interesting is I found a picture of Dorothy Height in it. And so Dorothy Height will, 2 years after this, will become the president of the National Council of Negro Women. But right then, she was a white woman. And so that's how I saw Dorothy Height, and that's how she appears in my book, for the most part, that she was a white person, but she is at that meeting. I couldn't find a picture of the two of them together, but I did find her there. And this is just to bring her home to the United States. Madie comes back home in '63, and this is in 1980, and you have this fellow South African person who embraces her, and she's been invited over, and so that you can get to see how South Africans saw Madie Hall Xuma. And then I also wanted you to know that she was a gardener. I wasn't going to put that in there, but it was very much a part of her life. And Creola Foote was her friend, a lifelong friend. Madie Hall Xuma had died by then, by 1986. She died in 1982. But Creola Foote receives this major celebration for her. But she and Madie Hall Xuma were helped to create this garden club, the state's garden club with African American women in it. And Creola Foote, like I said, will receive the celebration in 1986. And she takes that gardening over to South Africa as well, and she writes about it a lot. And like I said, I was not going to put it in the book, but I thought it was important. And I'm not a gardener, so but I wanted to round her out and make her the complicated character that she is, like we all are. That's a very complex character who is engaged in so many things. And so thank you very, very much. And hopefully that wasn't too long, that you get to get some sense of the kind of person that she was, and that she was not this linear person, just an activist, but she was also a family person as well. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for that. But I really want to know about the love affair. You know, I want to know, how do you get an Alfred Xuma? Not just that, but it just made me think about how, you know, you think of Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King. You know, they met in graduate school, you know, in Boston. Then you think of even Michelle and Barack Obama, you know, they were overlapping in law school together. You know, just that little meeting. And then when she went to New York, to Columbia, and she met Alfred Xuma, I guess I wonder if it was a real love affair or an affair of convenience. They saw the power in both what they brought to the table. I guess it was enough for her to get on a ship and go to South Africa. But I just wonder how that happened.
Well, let me say first, I had a really hard time trying to figure out whether I should put that chapter in there. But then I figured out I had to write about their love affair, because I knew people were, she sounded wacky.
She married him at like 45.
Yep, she was 45.
You know,
She'd never been
lady.
married before, right. So she was no spring chicken. And the fact that she got on a ship while the Germans are blowing ships out of the water, and she went over there to marry a man that she'd only met like a few times. They had a love affair through the correspondence.
Right.
And he was very smitten with her. So I was afraid to do it. But I thought, you can't not do this, because she sounds like she's a little touched somehow, you know, that she gets on a ship. And the man asked her to marry. First, she told him, nope, she was not marrying him. She was very, very, as we call it, independent today. She loved her life, and she told him that. She loved doing what she was doing, and she even had suitors that she cared about a lot. And one in particular, she told me, she didn't reveal his name. I think I know who it is, but I'm not sure. So I'm not saying it. She said she had one in particular, but she had suitors. So she told him that when he started, when his overtures turned romantic. Because, I mean, she literally sort of blessed him out at first. And I'm like, what in the world is wrong with you? I'm not marrying you. He wrote her that, you know, because he was really smitten with her when he met her in New York.
But he was a widow with 2 kids.
He was a widow with 2 children. So she becomes a stepmother or a mother at the age of 45, 46 for the first time. And so it was like, you can't not tell people about her, because she sounds like a wacky person. Who does this? Who gets on a ship and sails over to South Africa? She didn't marry him here with her family present. She married him in South Africa when she got there. And she was on a ship for, 3 weeks? Almost a month, sailing over there to him. Now, the plane started flying out of South Africa so she could get home in days later. But she had a lot of time to think about this. And she could have backed out, but she didn't. And the question that you asked about whether it was a marriage of convenience or what it was, I put the chapter in there because I needed people to see how this happened. Because nobody else has talked about why she married him, why she made that decision, how, in many ways, difficult it was. She talks about getting down on her knees at school and praying about it while she was teaching primary school in Winston-Salem, and that she actually heard God tell her, heard a voice and told her to go. Now, that's one story, and I believe her, because she was really a faithful person, especially to the AME Zion Church. But I also believe it was also her adventurous spirit. And that's the part I think she didn't quite put in there until later. She writes it in her letters that she was adventurous. And so I think that was a part of it as well. The question as to whether she loved him, I think initially this was part of her adventure. I think she cared for him deeply. But I will also say it is very clear that she fell in love with him and he her. So as a matter of fact, I now have a letter with her actually talking about when her husband died. The Coconuts were very kind to me, and they sent me some letters that she sent to their mother. She and their mother became very, very good friends. And she writes about when Alfred Xuma is dying. He has pancreatic cancer. And she tells this woman she has no idea what she's going to do, that she doesn't know how she can keep going. And she even said that she didn't care about her YWCA work anymore. She had never said that. And she even said she never thought she'd ever say such a thing. But they really loved each other. I cannot say for sure what they felt for each other initially, but I can say that they both believe in service. They were cut out of the same cloth. They had the same ideas about what their role was on this planet. And so if nothing else, that united them. And that's why she prayed that day and asked God what she should do. But I do know for sure that they loved each other deeply, and especially by the time he died. But in between, they made a formidable couple and did the best that they could for both Black South Africans as well as Americans in the United States.
Did you describe them as, during that time, like maybe, I don't know, the most popular, most powerful Black couple in the world?
Probably, but I didn't want to say that.
Well, because, if he was, the head of the ANC.
Right. They probably were. I don't doubt that, and Americans knew that. For those of you who've read a little of the book, you know that there are these very prominent people in the book. W.B. Du Bois is hosting something with someone else at the Schomburg Library. Well, it wasn't called the Schomburg at the time. It was a reading room, but it wasn't the library that we know of in New York City now. But he's hosting it. W.B. Du Bois is this iconic figure, and here we have him hosting Alfred B. Xuma. I was like, I can't believe this is happening. Paul Robeson is in this book and plays a major role. Max Jurgen, who you probably never heard of, who's also a graduate of Shaw. Madie Hall Xuma knew him. Alfred B. Xuma also knew him. You have some NAACP people who also show up in this book as well. They are also they probably were the it couple, Black couple in the world at the time.
One of her girlfriends was Mary McLeod Bethune.
And one of her girlfriends was
Yes.
Mary McLeod Bethune. Yes.
So I would think so. I know there are probably some questions in the audience, but I just wanted to, skip ahead a little bit of when she returned to Winston-Salem, in the 60s, during the Civil Rights Movement, really almost the beginning of the Civil Rights Movement. And if you could just say a little bit about her life then, and really bringing all of her experiences, together as one, and who she ended up.
She came back to the United States. It's a heck of a story. And actually it begins with apartheid, because on the one hand, she's in the United States in 1947. She comes home for the first time since she went over there in 1940 because the war was raging. Alfred Xuma had come to the United States the year before to protest against the leadership of South Africa. And then his trip was only like 6 weeks or something. Hers was going to be like 9 months long. So when she came home, she stayed for months or almost a year. And so when she leaves the United States in 1948 and goes back, apartheid has now happened. It has now been implemented because they had that election in May. She gets back in in late May, just before her birthday, June 3rd, and she is now moved. She came home from Jim Crow that was a little more malleable, she thought, and then she went back to South Africa, and she is now living under apartheid. She leaves apartheid in 1963. Alfred Xuma dies in 1962. She stays there for another year. Knew she was leaving because Alfred Xuma had told her she needed to get out because the apartheid had become way more draconian. We had the treason trials. Nelson Mandela, was going to be arrested and thrown in jail. All kinds of things were happening. Her and Soweto had over there dressed and what life was like. So she's doing that. She's appearing, giving talks at health fairs, and I think it was a public health community or organization that had a meeting. And so she's there talking about what her husband talked about, these health issues, particularly for African Americans in the United States to improve their health. And her father and her brother Leroy had done that as well. So she continues the fight when she comes back. She never stops, and she does the gardening. She goes, that's a part of the gardening club. And so she's very much still engaged in almost everything that she did, even before she left to go to South Africa.
Well, thank you very much, Wanda Hendricks, for that synopsis of a woman that we should have known more about, but now we do.
Sikelela thina lusapho lwayo Nkosi sikelele Afrika maluphakanyiswe uphondo lwayo izwa imithandazo yethu Nkosi sikelela thina lusapho lwayo Hoza moya